Dr. Vaughn.
Great. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to spend a lot of today really talking about mentorship and how you can get the most out of both being a mentor and being a mentee. And so I'd like for this to be a little interactive. That's always hard over Zoom, but I think we have a group today and an interesting enough conversation that we can open it up for a conversation. So I'll be asking some questions and going through some cases along the way about tough situations that we all probably will find ourselves in when it comes to navigating being a mentor or a mentee. So I'm excited to talk with you all about those items today. So just quickly to go through what I'm going to talk about today. So really starting off by defining what mentorship is and really thinking of mentorship as more than one type of career support that you can get. Talk about what it looks like to be an effective mentee and how to avoid some common missteps, and then also how to be an effective mentor and avoid mentorship malpractice and some errors on that side. And I'm really kind of coming from this from the point of view that I think throughout our entire lives, we're both mentors and mentees. I certainly consider myself to be both still. And so I'm hoping that we can learn how to hone both of those skill sets, both help ourselves be better mentees, but also help our mentees grow in their careers. So let's start first about just defining what mentorship is in general. You know, one of my favorite definitions for mentorship is this one here from Healy, which is an older definition, but I think one that still works. And that's the idea that mentorship is a dynamic, reciprocal relationship in a work environment between an advanced career incumbent and a beginner or a mentee that's aimed at promoting the career development of both. And what I like to point out really is that this is a two-way street. And I think sometimes mentees underestimate what they bring to the table. But, you know, a lot of us get satisfaction from working with mentees, from sharing our knowledge, training the next generation, and really and the mentees can bring a lot of enthusiasm that maybe we don't remember to have day to day. And so I love working with mentees. And I think when I was first coming into this, I didn't realize how much I brought to the table as a mentee. And then obviously as a mentor, you bring a lot of skills to the table. And really though, I think it's important to kind of think of this as a team and think of it as how you can meet as many people as possible and work with new groups of people, because you can get infusions of fresh new ideas. For me as a researcher, I think that really helps my research and helps keep me on the cutting edge. So, you know, I'm going to talk about the 4 archetypes and then bring in a 5th one that has been really important to my idea. But there used to be this thought that there's kind of one mentor and that kind of works as one person serves all your needs. But I think more recently we've come to realize that mentorship is a team sport and that there's more than just the traditional kind of mentor-mentee dyad. And there are at least 4 archetypes. Like I said, I'll bring in the 5th that I find really important. But these are the mentor, the coach, the sponsor, and the connector. And generally, when you're thinking through these, the mentor is the person who guides. These people often offer traditional one-on-one career development. They might be with you for many years over a stage of your career development. If you're doing research, they might help you write manuscripts, write grants. If you're more on an educational track, they might be someone who's thinking about how to get you more involved in the medical school or the residency program and how to help you with your long-term career goals. So this is someone that often personifies who you want to be kind of in the future, and so they can help guide you on that path. In contrast, the coach is someone who maybe helps with a single skill set, and they might come and go, you know, be a very brief influence in your life. So for example, again, if you're like a researcher, they might be someone who offers specific content expertise or a specific research methodology that helps you on like one grant or one paper when you're learning something new. If you're in a non-research kind of space, maybe they help you give your first talk, give you performance on your talk, or they help you negotiate and think about how to pitch something to your boss. So it's somebody who maybe provides like a single skill set, but doesn't necessarily see you through many years. And then there's the often underappreciated role of the sponsor. I bring this up because this person is incredibly important, especially for women and underrepresented minorities who often don't get enough sponsorship. The sponsor is someone who uses their position of authority to nominate you for a position, for an opportunity. And really, the sponsor typically doesn't have enough time to provide one-on-one mentorship. The important thing is that the sponsor needs to know what you're doing and what you're interested in the future, so that when opportunities arise, they can put your name in the ring and make you more likely to be able to go up for that promotion or that new opportunity. And then there's the connector. These are the people who I feel like are like the life of the party. Maybe they're the Twitter personality with 100,000 followers, right? These are the people who get a lot of excitement out of knowing a lot of different people, and not just that, but connecting people who don't know each other. So these are the people who say, oh my gosh, like you're working on that. I know someone else working on that, and they connect you to. And they don't often provide kind of research guidance or anything like that, or career guidance, but they know people. And so they can expand your network. And then the point of all of these is that if you have these kind of people in your network, you always kind of benefit as a mentee. And then, like I said, I hinted to begin with, I think there's a fifth archetype that's really important and kind of under considered, and that's the peer mentor. This is a picture of my group of women that I used to hang out with when I lived in Michigan. And we would get together once a month to talk about successes and struggles and things we were going through. In particular, for me, I found it to be very helpful to have a group of women peers, because I didn't have a lot of women that were senior to me to help provide guidance. And so they had different ideas. And near peers also had other strategies that were really helpful that perhaps more senior peer or senior mentors have kind of forgotten about those struggles or what it was like. You know, these were the people who could give me a bio sketch or a copy of something and say, try this, like this is what I tried, and actually provide some things that can offer kind of immediate hands-on experience. And during COVID, we turned this virtual. And so there's some flexibility in that as well. And so I think it's been a very helpful group for me, at least, to help with some of to help augment my mentorship team. And one thing that I'll bring up is really that roles can change over time. So this happens when the mentors change. For example, someone gets promoted and now, they're dean of a medical school, and maybe they don't have enough time to provide you the one-on-one attention that they used to. Or maybe they change institutions or they change focus, and it's hard for them to provide that same information that they used to provide with you, the same amount of time. But then also mentees needs change, right? When they decide to go in a new direction, maybe they need new coaches, or if they decide to go in a different career path, they need different sponsors. Maybe the mentee also changes institutions, so they need to grow their team. But then importantly, mentees start becoming mentors. And so their needs for some of that traditional one-on-one coaching through everything changes. And now maybe what they need mentorship on is how to be a mentor themselves. So for example, I know it was really helpful for me to use my mentor who used to help me kind of write papers to help me now kind of coach the next generation. And so he was a helpful person to go to help me kind of become a better mentor. So I'd like everyone to kind of take a moment and reflect on yourself and think about your kind of mentorship network and what categories you currently have: mentor, sponsor, coach, connector, peer. What categories, if any, you might be missing. And importantly, what kind of category do you think most describes you? Are you someone who loves to get to know a lot of people, so maybe you're a great connector? Are you someone who doesn't have a lot of time, so maybe it's more a sponsorship type of role? I'd like you to think about these and maybe offer some of your comments or your thoughts in the chat. While we're waiting, I can say that, for example, for me, when I really think about this, I already kind of mentioned at this point in my career, I need the one-on-one mentor a little bit less, but I found that I need that sponsor and those peers even more. So those have been really important to me. And I think when I moved, one thing that I found in particular was that having a sponsor at my new institution was something I needed and something I was missing. That was something I kind of really looked to, like leadership development programs to try to get plugged into, to try to identify new people. And then which category describes me most? I'm probably a great coach and mentor when it comes to research. So those are the skills I typically offer the most. Great. Great. And yeah, so I see in the comments, different roles and different roles that you fulfill for different people as part of your job. So that's great. I really think doing this kind of self-reflection for everybody is really helpful to kind of think through what to identify for your needs in the future. So that's kind of the idea of defining mentorship overall. I want to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what it looks like to effectively navigate some of these relationships, both from the point of view of the mentee and from the point of view of the mentor. And starting first with thinking about what successful or effective menteeship looks like, and in particular, thinking about managing up. And I really think through this as kind of 4 general rules of being a great mentee. And that starts with, first off, selecting the right mentors. But then second, being respectful of your mentor's time, learning to communicate effectively, and bringing that energy and enthusiasm to the table. Like I said earlier, when I'm looking at mentees, like what I love about working with mentees is their enthusiasm. And so if you can think about bringing that to the table, that's really helpful. So look through these a little bit more in detail. When you're thinking about who you want to be a mentor, I love this mnemonic from Vineet Arora, who talks about trying to pick a CAPE mentor. So someone who is capable, has the skill set that you're interested in, but also someone who's available to you. So that might not be the most famous person in your field. It's someone who has time. It's often someone just a few years kind of senior to you. So someone in that point often has a little bit of more time available, but also can provide some advice. And then someone who has a project of interest to you or something that you can work on together. And importantly, and I think we forget about this last one, but is easy to get along with. And when I'm looking to work with a new mentor for whatever role it is, it's really helpful actually to do a little bit of a background check to say, are they good to work with? Talk to some of their other mentees. Are there tips or tricks to work with? I always joke, but like my husband is a division chief of epidemiology here, and he's routinely known for being very bad at responding to emails. So I've heard his mentees provide tips and tricks for how you get him in person, face to face, so that you can get that really good feedback from him, because he's great at giving feedback in person, but kind of hard to get a hold of because he's constantly moving between offices. So, those tips and tricks from fellow mentees can be really helpful. And then I really think, the thing is always true that the higher you get, the less time you seem to have, and the busier your schedule seems to get. So I think it becomes really important to think about how you manage your mentor's time and use it wisely. And so one thing I really like is to meet regularly. So set meetings ahead of time. Otherwise, their calendar is going to fill up and it's going to be hard to meet with them. And send agendas ahead of time so that you can be prepared so that they can be prepared for what you're going to talk about. When you're asking for feedback, it's best in small bites. It's really hard to review large amounts of material at once. So if you can do something small, like review 1 page of a CV or a single letter of recommendation, that's a lot easier than can you review, my entire promotion packet at once. And provide adequate notice. If you're going to ask them to review something longer, provide them a couple of weeks. If it's something shorter, still need probably a week for that, because people can be on service or, out of town on vacation. So this is an example of one of the agendas that my mentee uses for me. And you can see at the top is just kind of a brief summary of what we're going to talk about during that day. But then everything else kind of goes over other things that are helpful for me to know. So like reminder of where she is in her career timeline, active projects she's working on both with me and with other people, and then conferences and events. And I've highlighted up there at the top, there's this little call out here that says email from Jennifer. And that actually is her bringing up a conflict that she's having. And I think really helpful for me to know that this is happening ahead of time so I can be prepared to figure out how to help her address that need. So it's really nice actually in these agendas to give people a little bit of warning if there's going to be something difficult to discuss, because it gives your mentor time to learn about it, to think about it, and be prepared to help you come up with a solution. And so I ask all of my mentees to provide an agenda, and I give them an example of what I think an agenda should look like, but then I allow them to be flexible in how they handle it. But I found it to be much, much more helpful if my mentees come prepared with an agenda, and we get a lot more accomplished during that time. And so in general, you know, the other thing, and this is part of kind of the second point, which is just communicate effectively. And I think that starts often in a mentorship dyad with discussing goals and aspirations. So make sure your mentor knows what your short and long-term goals are, make them aware of obstacles so they can help. They can't help you if they don't know what's going on. And then really try to have most communication be during meetings, especially things that are difficult, especially things that are a little bit more sensitive. If you are going to send emails, don't send multi-paragraph emails with vague questions kind of buried somewhere in the middle. Try to ask yes or no questions when you can. So if your mentor's kind of scrolling through their phone, they can easily respond with a yes or a no instead of having to figure out what's going on and read through your email multiple times. And as I kind of already alluded to, using agendas is both a template, but also a warning is helpful if there's something that is going to be contentious or a problem that's going to be discussed. And then being engaged, energizing, and collaborative. I mentioned this already, but really try to be an energy donor, not a recipient. You kind of drive forward your project. You're responsible for your career if that's what you're working on. So really thinking about how you can bring some enthusiasm, some excitement about what you're working on, and really start to develop a reputation of being a closer, someone who follows through on tasks in a timely manner. And critical to this is really under-promising and over-delivering. So if you think it's going to take you 6 weeks to get something done, say it's going to take you 8. And that way, if you do it in 6, then you're outperforming what you said you were going to do. But if it takes you a couple weeks later, you have some built-in wiggle room time. So really under-promise, over-deliver, get to be known as a closer, and your mentor, your sponsor, your connector will want to help you out and let others know about what you're doing. So with that on the good side, I think there's also, it's important to think about some of the missteps that can take place. This actually was an article that we published in JAMA back in 2017, and it came from a conversation with some of my peer mentors about missteps that they'd made and missteps that I'd made in my career and that we'd seen kind of going on around us. And I really think that the issue behind missteps comes from this angst and this anxiety about what it means to be a mentee, what it means to be successful in academic medicine. And this known issue that some things are system problems, right? There's bias, there are other things that make it really hard to move ahead. But there are sometimes personal mistakes we can do. And while you can't necessarily fix the system early on, if you can identify some of the personal things that can be fixed, you can really have some ability to improve your own mentoring relationships. And what we noticed really was that there are 2 origins of mistakes. There's lack of confidence, where behaviors kind of stem from a desire to either appear infallible or, you know, avoid being seen as less worthy. And so it's often rooted in low confidence or a fear of failure. These people might have kind of a fixed mindset or suffer from the imposter syndrome. And really, I kind of think about these mentees as coming in 3 main phenotypes. So they're the vampires. These are all funny names to try to add some levity to the situation. And I don't think anybody is necessarily kind of an extreme version of this, but I think everybody has these moments at some point during their menteeship, which is, you know, they are really, really insecure about their own abilities, and they ask countless questions, send countless emails, meeting requests, just don't have any confidence to do things on their own. And then there's the lone wolf, who's the complete opposite. And at first they appear maybe more confident, but often what it is they appear, they are afraid of asking for help because they think that makes them appear weak or foolish. But the issue is that they can go along doing well until they make a silly mistake that could have been easily prevented just by seeking help. And they end up doing something kind of very, very troublesome. And then there's the backstabber, and hopefully none of us have done this, but this is the person who performs well, but they really don't take criticism well, and they produce excuses or point to other people when mistakes happen. And the problem is that mistakes will happen. I've had I've committed many mistakes in my life. And the important thing about mistakes is being honest and open and talking about it very quickly to try to prevent mistakes from blowing out of proportion. And so all of these things kind of are really due to lack of confidence or inability to kind of approach your mentor about issues that are going on. The other origins of mistake, and the one that I've had a lot of problems with in my past, is conflict aversion. These are behaviors stemming from a desire to please or a distaste for confrontation. I think it's made even more worse by the hierarchical nature of academic medicine. We're not really taught to confront the people who are senior to us. And so sometimes that can lead to problems in a mentoring relationship. So mentees with conflict aversion are often the yes people. They might hide or bury their own interests in favor of the interests of others. And this can work in the short term, makes other people happy, but long term can lead to burnout, career disillusionment. And really, just like for the other type of problem, there are really three main phenotypes here. There's the overcommitter, which I think all of us have been at some point in our lives. This is the person who says yes to everything and then suffers high output failure due to lack of prioritization and development. There's the ghost. This is the one that I used to do, and I've gotten much better at. But this is the person who hides whenever they make a mistake, hoping that the poor performance will go unnoticed. But avoidance, unfortunately, is only a temporary fix. The problems just get bigger while you're hiding in a corner. And so confronting these things kind of early and often is really important. And then the doormat. Hopefully no one's a doormat. This is usually someone who's on the receiving end of a malpracticing mentor, but this is someone who's often used, seldom noticed, take on lots of tasks without being recognized or having advancement. And really, this is the person who forgets that it's a two-way street to mentorship and does all of the helping their mentor without any of the reciprocity. So I want to bring in a case that I think is actually really common. And so let's say your mentor has been looking for someone to help lead the development of a new project in your division. Your mentor turns to you and lets you know that they've been having difficulty finding someone and thinks that you would be great. On the one hand, it's not something you're really interested in doing and you're already swamped with your other projects. But on the other hand, your mentor really seems to need the help and maybe it won't be too much work. So what do you think about this? Do you agree to leading the project? If not, how do you say no without letting your mentor down? What issue do you think could be contributing to the problem? And what can be done by the mentor or the mentee to prevent this situation in the future? I would love if anybody has any thoughts about or experience. Has anyone experienced something like this in the past and what they've done to help the situation?
Well, I was going to add, I think when I was very junior, I took on a lot of things and I realize now a lot of them weren't to help my career and they're just I think we call them those activities that other people needed done. And so I feel like this scenario is kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started giving this talk, years ago, I used to always say that the answer should clearly be no. And now I pause and I say, okay, the answer is you should ask more questions. And that's often the answer in life. When your first reaction is like anger or emotional, try to change that to curiosity and say, okay, so why were you thinking about me for this role? And what this does is put the onus back on the mentor to be like, well, actually, or maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe this isn't the right thing for you. You can ask if the mentor already knows what you're doing, like, So how does this kind of fit into my career goals? How do you see this being an effective strategy for my career? What do you think? Why did you think of me for this position? Right? Asking questions like that can really, maybe it just helps them clarify, and they do a better job of explaining why this position is so key, that doing this is actually going to help you with your career. And, they just didn't explain it well. Or maybe they'll realize actually as they're talking to you that you're right, that this isn't the right time, and really it's just something that they need, but you're not the right person. So asking some questions first can really help. I think I started off that one phrase by saying it only helps if they already know what your goals are. So one of the things that could be contributing to the problem is that they don't actually know what your goals are. And so if that hasn't been communicated by you beforehand, they may think that they're helping you, but they might not be. And then obviously it could be that they're extremely busy and overworked, and they're trying to figure out how to get this thing done. And you could be the closest person that they found to ask. So, it's really helpful, I think, to get more information at this point. So if you do decide to say no, that can be really difficult. So I think it's really helpful, as I mentioned, to kind of set and communicate goals before problems arise. That can help head off some of these problems. But if you do end up getting asked to do something you want to do, it's important first for yourself to think, if I'm going to say yes, what is now getting a no? We all have a finite amount of time. So if you're adding something to your schedule, you're going to be removing something else. And you can actually use your mentor for this. If you're still not sure, you can be like, this sounds like a great opportunity, but you know that I'm already fully funded or working a lot. What do you think should come off of my plate so that I can do this activity? And they might look at your plate and say, actually, now that we think about it, maybe we shouldn't do this at this time. Or maybe they might help you pick something out. So, but it's important to think, because the thing that's getting a no shouldn't be family, sleep, your personal health. It should be something else. And then if you do need to give a no as an answer, I think it's really helpful to learn how to give a positive no. And this is a book that I really highly recommend for everybody to read at least once in their career. It's this idea of, if you're going to say no, you say yes first to yourself. So you're saying yes to, what your priorities are, what's already on your plate, and doing those well. You say no to the specific thing that's being asked of you, but then you say yes to continuing the relationship with the person that's asking you. And often you can do that by suggesting someone else, suggesting a different project, talking about how this isn't the right time, but you want to do it again in the future. So there are ways to kind of reframe the situation so it sounds positive, even though you're saying no. And then preventing some of these things really starts with open and honest communication, both of your goals and missteps when they do happen. I think the other thing that's really helpful in preventing some of these missteps is to reframe mistakes as a learning opportunity. I think a lot of us were taught kind of over the course of our careers that making mistakes is bad, and that is true. But especially when you're in a menteeship position, your job, your goals are to learn and to grow and to get better. And when you make mistakes, you're more likely to do that. And so that's a hard thing, I think, to internalize, but it's a really important thing to keep helping you kind of take those opportunities, take those risks where you might make mistakes, but then learn from them if you do make mistakes. And then develop a peer mentorship group. I think this is incredibly important for the underconfidence subtype of missteps, because your peers can really help provide you with confidence, with a sounding board, so you can ask for advice from your peers before you go to your boss or your mentor. That's another really good way of trying to address some of these issues. So now that we've talked about mentorship from the mentee side, let's talk about it from the mentor side, which is going to be really helpful for a lot of us who are doing a lot of mentorship. So I think there are kind of 6 big categories or strategies that every mentor should do. One is to choose mentees carefully. So when I say this, what I find to be really important in mentees is that they're actually going to deliver. If I'm going to invest time and energy and support into a mentee, I want to make sure that they take advantage of that and that they'll come back and they'll actually deliver. And so one thing I often do with mentees is provide a little bit of a task for them, right? So like they come to me, they have an idea, I ask them, oh, that sounds great. Will you read this paper and let me know what you think of it? Or why don't you do a literature review and see if you can find out if anybody's done that before? And half of the time, I never hear from them again. And that's okay. It saved them a lot of time. It saved me a lot of time. But then the other half of the time, they respond, and it's beautiful to see what they can do when they're given kind of a task. And then I get really excited about working with them. They have shown their enthusiasm. They've done some work, and it's a lot better. So kind of doing that initial test can be really helpful to weed out the people who are going to come to your office, but then might never follow up. I think just as it's important for mentees to think about a mentorship team, it is for mentors as well. You're not going to be able to provide all the needs for people. So really serving that connector role and connecting them to other people who can help them with specific skills they need or specific leadership pathways is really important, really helpful. Running a tight ship, what I mean by that is really setting up what your expectations are. It's really hard for mentees if they don't know what you want. So if you're a person that likes agendas, you should tell them that and show them what a successful agenda looks like. If you don't like agendas that much, that's fine. But let people know ahead of time what your style is so that they can kind of meet those expectations. And then if something's going on and they're not meeting expectations, I think it's totally okay to be flexible about that for like major life events or things that happen. But if it becomes a routine, really helpful for you to set down the hammer. Like I've told you I like agendas for the meeting. I didn't see an agenda for this, so I'm gonna cancel this meeting. Why don't you reschedule when you have an agenda ready for us to talk about? And so actually kind of having those consequences is helpful, especially if you're going to work with someone long term and you want to make sure that they continue to deliver well. The other thing that you should do as a mentor is really try to head off rifts or resolve them. So a lot of things that are the hardest parts of being junior faculty is negotiating the power dynamics and the relationship between two people. And sometimes your mentee needs person A and B to work together and be happy, but person A and B hate each other, right? And it's going to be a lot harder for them to navigate that than it is for you to navigate it. And so I think one thing we can do as mentors is really help our mentees navigate some of those more challenging relationships where maybe you have more information and influence than they're going to have. And then we talked earlier about the fact that every mentee becomes a mentor. I think really preparing them for the transition, starting to talk to them and saying, I don't think I need to like watch you give a talk. I think you're ready to do this without me kind of giving you feedback. I don't think you need my help on this anymore. Kind of giving them that advice when you think that they're ready to kind of spread their wings and be free on their own. And then not committing mentorship malpractice, which is the next part that we're going to get into and kind of the sad part of practicing medicine and academic medicine. This came from an article from two of my mentors, Vineet Chopra and Sanjay Saint, back in 2016. And they really established mentorship malpractice as two different types. There's the active type, which I think is less common nowadays and maybe less common in medicine than, for example, in some graduate labs. But still, when it happens, it's a big problem. It's really dysfunctional behavior. It's easy to spot. It's purposeful. It's deliberate. I'm not going to talk about it today because the answer is get away as fast as you can. This is a person who has a personality disorder or they're experiencing, maybe their career's not going the way that they've planned and they're taking you down with it. And so this is a person to run the other direction from. But what I am going to talk about is passive mentorship malpractice, because I think I've been guilty an infinite number of times of passive mentorship malpractice. This is something that we all do at some point. It's more insidious, it's less easy to identify, and it's typified by inaction rather than action. And so I think both as mentors, we need to understand when we do this and how it can affect our mentees, but then also know as mentees some tips and tricks to overcome passive mentorship malpractice, because the answer is not leave your mentor for forever. The answer is figure out how to work past it. So the three types of passive mentorship malpractice that I'm going to talk about are the bottleneck. So this is a person who, my husband that I mentioned earlier, really busy. Maybe they're got too much more than they should on their plate. And end up really lacking bandwidth. And so they commit to things, they really want to be a good mentor, but then they're have a last minute grant they have to write, followed by an out of country trip that they have to go on. And suddenly they're just too busy to really help. And this can mean that it kind of, if you require their sign off for things, then, it can really, really delay your advancement. Then there's the country clubber. These are kind of the funny ones. These are the people who view mentorship as a ticket to popularity. They like building the social capital, but they don't like taking the responsibility. So they'll take credit for you as a mentee, but they're not going to actually help you when they have to help you manage that fight between person A and B, or, there's a budget issue that comes up. They're not going to go to bat for you over that. So this is the person who maybe is actually a really good connector, but maybe not so much a good traditional one-on-one mentor. And then there's the world traveler, similar to the bottleneck, but really, highly successful. Maybe you wanted them to be your mentor because they're really well known in the field, but they really don't have time for trainees, for learnees, for mentees on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about this as a case, because I think this is a far more common one that we have to deal with. So, you and your mentor have worked together successfully for over a year. However, she was just promoted to a new position, which requires much more time. Since then, it's been difficult to find time to meet one-on-one. She's rescheduled multiple meetings at the last minute. And furthermore, you just missed the deadline for a project submission because she didn't provide feedback or sign off on the project in time. And so what kind of mentorship malpractice is this? What issues could be contributing, and what can both the mentee and the mentor do to solve the problem? So I think if we go back to the types of mentorship here, this is probably the bottleneck. So a person who really kind of now lacks bandwidth to be a committed mentor. And what's really exacerbating the problem, obviously, is the recent promotion, right? Like, this is someone who's now having to do a new job. They're probably still doing a lot of their old work as well. So they're probably working a lot harder. Clearly, they used to do a very good job, and now they're just overwhelmed. So the ways that you can work on this as a mentee, I think first and foremost is to ask yourself, like, at this point in time, if you've been working together for a couple of years, do you still need the same level of guidance from that person that you used to need, right? There may be actually true that you have outgrown some of what you need from them. Maybe this person is actually better as a sponsor for you. Now that they've got a new leadership position, they don't have time to like coach you on a paper or a grant, but maybe they can help provide you with opportunities now that they're in that position. Maybe what you need to do is expand your mentorship team or lean more on other people. So those are some of the more existential questions. But if at the end of the day, the answer is you still really need their time, it's time to discuss new strategies to meet with them. And sometimes that's a direct conversation. You can say, I feel like recently we've been having a harder time connecting. Is there a strategy that we can use to make sure that, that you have enough time for me and to review the items that we need? What can I do to make you more successful? You can ask those kind of questions and problem solve. This is why having that open communication is really helpful, because it's really different person to person. Some people are great with email. Some people suck at it. Some people you really have to see in person. Some people like agendas and looking through, large amounts of writing at once, but other people really need those like smaller bits. So really trying to problem solve with the mentor to figure out about that. And then I think from the mentor point of view, anytime you think about kind of moving on to that next position, you're leaving an institution, you're getting promoted, really good to think about the people that you're leaving behind. So whether that's leaving behind intentionally or unintentionally, is there someone that you can hand them off to, right? Can you prepare for the transition and provide someone else that they can work with? Are you still able to be their mentor in the same or maybe a different capacity? Can you have an open conversation about that? Or maybe the answer is actually that you have too much on your plate and there are other things that you need to take off. If you really think mentorship is still super important to you, you need to take other things off your plate so that you can do a good job of all of these things and not be an overcommitter. So I think there are different things to think about, some of them very existential questions. But I think both the mentee and the mentor have things to think about. And this will happen to each of us in our time, where hopefully, as we get busier, we will find that we need to readdress our priorities. So in summary, preventing mentorship malpractice, I think it's helpful to think about not being complicit. So as a mentee, you need to have that open dialogue and talk to your mentor when there are issues. Setting those boundaries, communicating needs, establishing a mentorship team. We talked about that earlier, but the reason it's also helpful for mentorship malpractice is, if you have to separate from a mentor for some reason, that's really hard to do if they were your only person. But if they were a part of a mentorship team, it can be a lot more helpful. And the other thing is that if you have a mentorship team, you can actually sometimes ask one of your other mentors to help you with the first mentor, right? So they might be able to have a more honest conversation than you can and advocate for you in a way that maybe you feel uncomfortable with. So we actually do this sometimes when there's like a conflict between the mentor and the mentee, or two mentors. You bring together the entire mentorship team into a room, and then you have them kind of talk, facilitated by one of the mentors who's already kind of been briefed on the situation. So it's a way of really trying to help in those situations where the power dynamic can be really troublesome and you really don't want it to hurt the mentee. Because obviously at the end of the day, mentorship malpractice is most damaging to the mentee, and the goal of kind of having the team is to try to prevent harm from trickling down to the mentee. And then knowing when to walk away. For most passive mentorship malpractice, walking away isn't needed. It is needed if you see any of those active bad behaviors, things like lying, cheating, harassment, horrible things like that. That's walking away immediately. And then I'll just briefly bring up kind of virtual mentorship, since that's now the new rule of the game. It's been nice because now you can have mentors that are near and far. I have mentees that are in 4 different institutions right now, and that's wonderful. It's I can see so many more people, and they have access to so many more people. But there are obviously barriers to that as well, right? It's harder to establish connections, personal connections, and trust, all of those things necessary to have that open dialogue that I've talked about being so important. I think some other tricks for virtual mentorship are really be early because we've all had that thing where we try to open Zoom and suddenly Zoom's like updating and you have no control over it, right? And then Zoom crashes and then takes you 10 minutes to log back on. So especially when your mentor's time is really valuable as a mentee, really try to log on early. And then when you can, I think it's still really helpful to be in person whenever you can. Maybe that's for a social activity. Maybe it's for an actual mentorship meeting. But every once in a while, there should be some face-to-face time to allow some of that personal connection. Just because the building rapport is so much harder. And then I think it's really, again, important to keep on that schedule, because when you don't see someone every day, maybe they're working virtually, maybe they're at a different institution, it's really hard to know what's going on. And so making sure to have an established check-in routine, maybe that's every 6 months, but maybe it's more often for people that you're mentoring more directly, just to make sure there's a check-in, even if it's just to say like, everything's going well, no major concerns, so that people aren't kind of forgotten and so that you don't miss people who maybe are going through burnout or some major issues. So in conclusion, mentorship's two-way street, best as a team sport. I've talked about that for multiple reasons, but I think that's really true. It can involve mentors, sponsors, coaches, connectors, and peers. Not everyone needs everything, but it's helpful to have different pieces of that at different times in your life. And sometimes one person can fill multiple roles, but often you need multiple people. And then mentee missteps can really be avoided with good open communication, setting your goals and priorities, and sharing those goals and priorities with your mentor. And then mentorship malpractice threatens the mentor-mentee relationship and can lead to major problems for the mentee. And it really can be offset by things like setting boundaries, having good communication, and having a mentorship team. And then, we didn't talk about this. I always never quite have time to talk about the equity aspects of mentorship, but I think it's really important. And just because this is a group of people who are serving as mentors, I think it's really helpful to think about proactively how we can mentor for equity. So making sure to do an audit of kind of the mentees that you have and making sure that they represent a diverse group of people. And so that you're kind of sharing the bounty equitably. So with that, a big thanks to all of my mentors in the past. These are some more resources, a book that I wrote with Benit Chopra and Sanjay Saint, and a book with a chapter on mentee missteps from mentoring and health professions education. And I think we have some time left over. If there are any questions or comments that people have, I'd love to have a conversation. Thank you.
Valerie, thank you for such a great presentation. I love how you break everything down about mentees, mentors. We do have a question from Dr. Anavim. He asked, how do you assess the success of a mentor-mentee relationship? And if it is not successful after a while, like for example, year, what strategies do you recommend to end it and hand it off to another mentor?
So this is a great question, and I'm assuming this point of view is from the mentor, but I think it's also very important from the other side. So, I mean, I think this starts with setting up those goals and priorities, and you can put the onus of this on your mentee. You know, before you meet with them again, ask them to again come up with an agenda, but also a mission statement, and come up with. You can use the SMART goal framework for what is the goal for this. Have them define what success looks like. And you can provide feedback into that, right? So that's not what I see success as. Like if their success is just we meet 4 times a year, that's not a successful relationship. Like what is the outcome? What is the goal they're looking for? And then you can readdress that, you know, in your subsequent meetings and say, you know, it doesn't seem like you know, we're really hitting this goal that you set for yourself. Why do you think that is? And, you know, depending on who it is and the issue, you can also say, you know, I think you might be better able to achieve that goal with X person. Why don't I facilitate an introduction to you? Something like that. I mean, it depends on the exact scenario. I'm not sure if that helps or if you want to clarify a little bit, but I think the setting a goal in the beginning can be very helpful there.
Does anyone have any other questions? I think as they type, I had a question is there like an ideal number of mentees a mentor should carry, especially in this day and age of very busy work for people who are heavy clinicians or heavy on the research side? What's an ideal number if you have one?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it depends on what you're doing with your mentees. If you're just offering career guidance, it's a lot easier to have more. If you're helping them lead a project, then your number needs to go down. If you're sponsoring people, it can be a lot more, right? Because that's kind of maybe every 6 months you're talking to people. So I think it kind of depends on what exactly the role is that you're serving as a mentor. But I would say for someone like myself who mentors people on research projects, I would say somewhere around 6 is like the max I would do and think I could do well. The idea there is, you know, if I'm meeting with people every 2 to 4 weeks, right, the number of hours add up. And that's like papers I have to read, abstracts I have to read. And so that's been about where I feel any more than that. And I feel like my quality as a mentor starts to dip. And so that's when I might bring in someone else or try to be a little bit more selective in who I invite in to be a mentee. But that might be different for different people. And I'm sure it also matters based on the amount of time you have for things and whether you have protected time. So if you're an APD for a residency program, hopefully you're getting some protected time to talk to the residents. And so you might be able to do a lot more. As a director of hospital medicine research, I have a lot of protected time for research, none particularly for mentoring, but mentoring helps the research side of my career. So it kind of aligns with some of the protected time I have for research. So that provides me some effort. If you're someone who's 100% clinical time, your number might be 1 that you can do successfully.
I guess as we wait for if anyone else has any other questions, I had another kind of follow-up question to that. More so, what does your institution do for, like, we know that having good mentorship can help retain faculty at your organization. And a lot of organizations are struggling with retention of their mid-career faculty. And so what suggestions do you have for mid-career faculty, for those who are on the call who are more senior faculty acting as mentors and those who are the mentees?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And I think there's less that's been studied about mid-career mentorship. Um, this is a place where personally, as someone who I consider myself to be mid-career, my senior mentors are less a part of my life and my peer mentors are more a part of my life. So that's a personal thing that you can do as a mid-career person, is I think really find that network of people that are at a similar stage as you. They might be at your institution, they might be in a different division, different department. Maybe they have a similar but slightly different role. Maybe they're, you know, uh, doing a research lab, but in a completely different specialty, but that means you'll have the same issues just with different people. And so peer mentors are really helpful. I think that's something that can be done on the personal side. I would say from the institution side, some of the things that we do that I really like. So we have a mid-career coaching program, which is more kind of specifically targeted. So the mid-career people kind of set up a development plan, set up some SMART goals, and then a coach helps them with one-on-one skills for that. So how do they negotiate better? How do they lead meetings better? How do they give feedback? Whatever the skill set might be, the coach can provide kind of those one-on-one interactions. And then I think things like leadership development programs, and some of those are local, some of those are more national. So things like ELAM, those can be ways too of helping specifically developing more the leadership skill set, which is often what people are looking for as they go into mid-career.
We have another question from Peter Pham. He asks, what is your favorite question to ask when looking for a mentor?
Oh, that's a hard one. I think, what are you excited about right now? What are you most excited that you're working on? And you can really start to see people's passion. And if they don't have anything they're excited about that they're working on, it might not be someone you want to work with. But I love to hear what people are passionate about. And so what are you most excited about that you're working on right now is a way to really hear kind of what the future holds, like what they think the future holds, even if it's not something that you end up being really interested in, you learn a lot.
I guess there's no other questions. Oh, wait, no, there's another question. Sorry. What are some ways for mentors to ensure that mentees maintain the work-life integration balance while being accountable?
I struggle with this so much. I feel like I was trained in a place where work-life balance didn't exist. And so I try to role model work-life balance with my mentees. And I tell them straight out, like, my rule is I don't work on weekends except for clinical time. And I'll be honest and open about that and let them know that I get all of my work done in between. And so like, I first off, I try to role model work-life balance. And then the second piece is I try to be understanding of when issues come up, but also try to help them set reasonable expectations. I think that's when we find the most problems, is when they overpromise and underdeliver, right? They say, okay, I'll get you that paper in 2 weeks. If this is someone who's never written a paper before, it may be that they have no idea that it takes probably a year for them to write a paper for the first time, not 2 weeks. And so I think you can help them set realistic expectations. I think also help them work through their priorities, right? I kind of mentioned all of this, like as a mentee, you should come and you should be like, these are my goals. This is what I'm going to do in life. But really part of the conversation is that the mentor helps them refine that. So, what are your goals? What do you want to do? What items are you working on right now? How do those things help you achieve your goals? Is there anything that you like need to get off your plate? Kind of helping them with some of those questions, helping them prioritize, and then helping them manage if they need to say no to people, how to do that. I actually just had a mentee recently who got asked to be an APD when that's like not the job she wants. And so I really tried to help her kind of manage how to say no to that situation, because what she really wanted to do right now is spend more time with her newborn baby that was just born. So that was something that she kind of wanted to put off to the future. So I think really helping to have those conversations about priorities and how to say no is really helpful.
At
The
your,
I didn't answer the accountable piece, but I
Mhm.
actually think you can do that while making people accountable.
Mhm.
So, and that's with setting the realistic expectations. You say, okay, I know you're really busy, you've got a lot of life stuff going on, so let's set a reasonable timeline. But once we set that, I need you to be on time. So I think you can, if you're upfront about how long something's going to take and more reasonable, then you can also be kind of a little bit more strict on the back end about saying, you said you were going to get this to me by this time. I haven't seen it yet. Where is it? Don't do this again.
The other question I have is, at your institution, do you, at University of Utah or at your previous institution, did you have a lot, did the faculty have more formal mentoring or more of the informal style of mentoring, or was it split evenly?
Yeah, so I think the people on the tenure track and the researchers tend to get more formal mentoring. I think that's probably true across almost every institution, right? I mean, it's part of I'm on a career development award, and your career development plan, you have to list out who your mentors are and how they're going to contribute to your career.
Mhm.
So at least on paper, you have something very formal. It doesn't always exist in real life. I think for non-research faculty, non-tenure track faculty, it's harder to have the same level of formality. You have to work at it a little bit more from the mentee side. But I've seen some places do it really well by having formal like launch committees, especially for new faculty when they come in, or for people who are like nearing the time of promotion, or maybe have been at the same level for a little too long and need a little bit more dedicated time. I've seen some places do a good job of having more formal teams. What we do is we actually have mentoring dyads in our division. So we'll have 2 mentees and 2 mentors who meet I think we're supposed to meet every 4 months to talk about some issues and do some career coaching. So that's the structured piece brought up by the division. And then people are free to seek kind of their own mentorship beyond that.
Does anyone have any other questions? We have about 2 more minutes left in our session. It looks like you answered everyone's questions in your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time out to spend with our faculty and really kind of give us a nice structure on the role of the mentee, the role of the mentors, and putting a nice framework for us. And we hope to institute some of those things here as well. So thank you so much, Valerie, for taking your time today. And thank you to all of you who joined. And we will be posting this on our website, and we'll have the slides as well.